I'm Kimberly Bush, your online legal correspondent for AskTheLawyers.com. Today on our show Legality, I'm in Denver, Colorado, speaking with Doug Thomas, founder of DUI Defense Matters. DUI Defense Matters represents clients facing alcohol and marijuana-related DUIs. Today, Doug's going to speak to me about what we need to know to stay safe and legal in Colorado. Thanks for being on the show, Doug. I think a lot of people don't understand how an officer would know someone was under the influence of marijuana while they were driving. So talk to me about that.
Well, Kim, an officer would not know for certain you're under the influence of marijuana, but an officer would look for things that would make him suspect you're under the influence of marijuana. So, for example, your appearance, bloodshot eyes, your behavior, whether you're driving erratically, how you respond to the officer, or things in your car that are visible, such as a pipe, a bong, or other paraphernalia, or the marijuana itself. All of those things would give the officer suspicion to believe that you're impaired while driving.
But how would he even see any of those things? Like they're going to pull me over for like a wrong turn or something small. I forgot to use my signal. Is that how this all starts usually?
That's generally how it starts. It could start because you're driving erratically, you're speeding, you're not using your turn indicator, you're changing lanes, you're weaving.
Do stoners usually speed? Okay, so
that depends what else they've had.
So when he pulls me over, how do I act to the officer? What do I do?
Well, you should act politely and treat the officer with respect.
Okay.
The last thing you want to do when an officer pulls you over is get into a confrontation with them.
Okay.
In fact, you're trying to appease the situation and make it go as rapidly as possible. The better you do that, the more likely it is the officer will leave you alone. The more you confront the officer, the more the situation is going to escalate.
Okay, so be polite, treat him with respect. What if he asked me to do like a field sobriety test? Do they do that for marijuana like alcohol?
They do, in fact. They have a different field sobriety test for marijuana, but they would ask you to do that if they believed you were under the influence of marijuana. It's our recommendation that people politely decline to do that test.
Okay, so I don't have to do the test if I don't want to?
You are not legally required to do the field sobriety test, and in refusing to do so, there's no legal consequence.
What should I actually say to the officer? Because I think I'd be a little intimidated if I get pulled over and a police officer is trying to accuse me of something. What should I say to him?
No, thank you.
No, thank you? Okay, well, that's good to know. Also, what's going to happen to me once I tell the officer, no thank you, officer, I don't want to take your field sobriety test?
Well, that depends.
Okay.
Simply refusing to take the field sobriety test would not cause you to be arrested or cited for driving under the influence. But if there are other factors, for example, erratic driving, the evidence of marijuana in your car, the police could still arrest you for driving under the influence, take you to either one of the police stations or to one of the houses that they do and ask you to perform a blood test.
Okay, blood tests kind of scare me. Do I have to take the blood test?
You do not, but refusing to take the blood test does have consequences and legal consequences towards your driver's license.
I think the reason I'd be uncomfortable taking a blood test is what if I was a chronic smoker or what if I had smoked the night before and I was kind of afraid that maybe those past, smoking would influence the test even though I wasn't under the influence when I was driving.
Well, I believe the scientific evidence does show that for chronic, severe, long-term chronic users of marijuana, they could actually have a test that exceeds the presumptive limit in Colorado, yet not be impaired by it. Okay. So that could be a legitimate concern for chronic users.
So you say presumptive limit, what does that mean?
Well, that's a fancy legal term. For example, when you're drunk driving and you're over the limit, if you're over
0.08.
0.08, you're over the limit, you are guilty of driving drunk.
Okay.
For marijuana users, if you're over 5 nanograms, you're not automatically guilty. You're presumed to be impaired, but a jury or a judge could still find you're not impaired because you're over that limit.
Are these tests accurate? I really don't understand how they can measure this and have it be legally upheld.
Well, the blood test itself is accurate. It would show 4 nanograms or 6 nanograms. The question is that truly impairing your ability to drive?
So what are some of the defenses that somebody accused of a marijuana DUI might be able to present to the court?
Well, I think there are lots of defenses. One is the accuracy of the test.
Okay.
For marijuana, it is very important that the police would take the test within 2 hours. The longer they wait, the less reliable that test is. The second thing is there are defenses to whether you're actually impaired. You could be driving perfectly, although in those instances, usually the officer wouldn't have pulled you over.
Maybe he pulled me over because I had a bumper sticker that he thought was suspicious. Does he think that ever happens?
I think that happens occasionally.
Speaking of that, I mean, it's legal to drive with marijuana in your car, but is there any place you'd recommend we keep it?
Yes, yeah. Although it's legal to drive in your car, it's not legal to have an open container. It's required that it be in a sealed container.
Okay, like alcohol.
Exactly.
Okay.
We at DUI Defense Matters prefer to take things extremely safe, and we recommend that it's in a sealed container in the trunk of your car.
Wonderful. I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Doug's going to tell me more about what to do if you've been pulled over and accused of driving while under the influence of marijuana.
My name's Will Smith, and I work here at DUI Defense Matters, and I'm one of the team of attorneys that represents our clients. My background, before I came to work in private defense, is with the DA's office, where I was a deputy district attorney. Bottom line, I know what the prosecution's looking at when they look at your case. There are 3 standardized tests in Colorado. One is a horizontal gaze and nystagmus, the other is the walk and turn, and finally there's the one-leg stand. The most important thing to remember is that those are voluntary maneuvers. The second most important thing to remember is that your law enforcement should be respected and they should be appropriately communicated to. It will not benefit you in any way to be adversarial or confrontational with law enforcement. It's only going to cause more problems for you, trust me. Ultimately, though, you should absolutely, politely decline to do those roadside maneuvers. Those tests are only as good as a law enforcement officer who's observing those tests. If you want to know more about me and other attorneys in my practice area, go to DUIDefenseMatters.com.
And we're back. I'm in Denver, Colorado at DUI Defense Matters, speaking to Doug Thomas about what to do if you've been accused of driving while under the influence of marijuana. So Doug, we were just talking about the blood test and whether it's voluntary to take the blood test and how different people that smoke different amounts might have varying outcomes of it. So what happens now? I took the blood test. Am I still sitting in the jail cell?
You're probably not still sitting in the
Okay.
jail cell.
That's good.
In fact, oftentimes the police don't take you to jail all the time unless there are other reasons to do that.
Like if I'd caused an accident or something like that.
That's true, or you're unable to function well. Or there are other things involved, bodily injury, you've been disruptive to the police, there's something else going on.
Okay.
Usually, the police officers will take you to one of their safe facilities and you just stay there to sober up. Once you've sobered up, in the eyes of the facility, they'll release you on your own.
So do I have to put a bond in these situations?
Not if you're taken to a facility, but if you're taken to jail, you would be in fact required to bond out in order to be released from jail.
When you say facility, what is that?
Well, we've all heard about detoxification facilities. So when we're
Okay.
talking about drunk driving, people generally understand that you go to a facility, usually a psychological facility, in order to detox and sober up.
All this for marijuana?
It's the same thing for marijuana.
Okay.
The facilities now have a hard time because they don't understand when someone's under the influence, and they don't always understand when someone's sober and they can release them.
Okay. So once I've been released, then what happens? Do I have a hearing date or what do I do?
Well, you'll have 2 things again.
Okay.
First, you'll have a date for your driver's license. It's very important that, in fact, you take steps to protect your driver's license.
So they're going to try to revoke my license because I got pulled over for marijuana?
They will, in fact, try to do that.
Okay.
You also have a court date where you'll be arraigned and you'll have to plead guilty or not guilty to the charge of driving while impaired.
So 2 separate court dates we're
That's
talking
correct.
about. How fast do these court dates come up?
Well, that depends. For the driver's license hearing, that comes up very fast,
Okay.
within 7 days.
Within 7 days?
Correct.
So I have to really call somebody before 7 days, or probably the next day, I would imagine.
That would be the best
Okay.
practices.
Because if I lose my license, I might not be able to take my kids to school. I might not be able to get to work. Like, this is a serious matter to get your license revoked.
That's correct. It is a serious matter, and it affects people's ability to get to work.
So what can an attorney do for me at the hearing to try and, take my license away?
Well, again, that depends on the facts of each circumstance about what happened,
Okay.
whether the officer has legitimately stopped you, whether the test is valid. There's all kinds of things you can do to protect your license.
Okay, so we have the license revocation hearing, and then there's a whole other hearing besides that? What's that all about?
Yeah, the actual criminal case is very separate from the case involving your driver's license. The criminal case is a case where the district attorney will try and prosecute you criminally for your actions.
Okay, so what are some common, or what is a possible defense that I might have if I've been accused of a marijuana DUI?
Well, I think we'd like to look at this in two different ways. First, we'd like to look at whether the test itself is valid. This is a
Okay.
test.
The
that
blood test.
The blood test that
Okay.
the police officers, or any other test that the police officers give, was valid.
Those sobriety tests that I'm not supposed to say yes to.
Exactly.
So if I didn't watch the show beforehand and I didn't know not to take the sobriety test, then I had, and they're going to use that against me?
They are going to use that field sobriety
What
test
if I'm
against
just
you.
a klutz and couldn't really walk the line because I just misstepped?
Certainly that could be presented to a judge or a jury, but the police officers are also very good, and they're very experienced at telling their story, and their story about how you failed that test is very different than yours.
So who's going to believe me over a police officer? Like, is that even possible?
It is possible, and again, you have to take into account everything that happened. Another way to defend the cases is to look at whether the stop, the original reason to pull you over, is valid. The
Okay.
police still have to do their job correctly. They still have to follow the Constitution and the laws, and they still have to have probable cause to pull you over and arrest you. So one of the things our attorneys do is to make sure the police have done their job correctly.
Okay. So when you say probable cause to pull you over, what does that mean?
Well, that could be pretty much anything, but again, as we've discussed before, erratic driving, accidents, all kinds of circumstances which would lead the police to believe that you're under the influence, whether it be drugs or alcohol.
Okay. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Doug's going to explain to me how the attorneys at DUI Defense Matters represent their clients in court and what kinds of defenses might be available to someone accused of a marijuana DUI.
Marijuana cases are great cases to take to trial for the simple fact that the science is just not quite there. The state wants it to be, and they think it is, but it just isn't. There is no level in Colorado whereby if you have such and such amount of marijuana in your system, you are absolutely guilty. Compare that to alcohol, where at 0.08, it doesn't matter if you were fine to drive or not, or if you drank the night before. If you're at 0.08 or over, you are guilty. Part of the problem that the prosecution has with the standardized field sobriety test for marijuana is that they're not validated for marijuana DUIs. They're standardized in that you give them the exact same way every single time. They're not validated in that there is no body that has said these tests detect impairment for marijuana.
And we're back. I'm Kimberly Bush, and I'm in Denver, Colorado, speaking to Doug Thomas, founder of DUI Defense Matters. So Doug, if I'm pulled over for a marijuana DUI, I know I wasn't smoking when I got pulled over. I forgot to use my turn signal. It seems to me like a pretty easy, open and shut case, but I did take the blood test, and I am a chronic smoker. Can I just represent myself in this scenario?
Well, you can,
Okay.
but just remember that the prosecutors and the district attorney are not there to help you.
Right.
They're there to prosecute you.
Okay.
And so if you don't know the system, then you don't understand how to hold the police accountable for their actions,
Right.
number one, to make sure that the police did everything correctly according to the law to be bringing the charges in the first place. And number two, you won't know how to defend yourself and how the system works in order to get the best outcome for you. A good lawyer knows how the system works, know how to hold the police accountable, and to know how to get the best outcome for you.
Do you think a lot of these marijuana DUIs, do they plead out to lesser charges? Should you, settle the case with the prosecutor if he or she offers you a deal?
Not from our experience so far. From
Okay.
our experience so far, the police are bringing a lot of really bad cases for the police that we believe the clients are entirely innocent and are not driving under the influence of marijuana. We think the evidence that the police are bringing in the cases right now are fairly weak.
Okay, so the prosecution is going to have a fairly weak case, so there's no reason why I shouldn't try to fight these charges?
Of course, each circumstance is different,
Yeah.
and it's hard to say in all cases,
Okay.
but certainly in some of the cases we're seeing recently, we believe we can fight and we can prevail on these cases.
Can you give me an example of a case that happened recently where somebody, the blood test didn't, you proved the blood test wrong?
Well, for marijuana, proving the blood test wrong,
Yeah.
and just like for alcohol, wrong, entirely wrong, is a little difficult.
Okay.
But certainly, for example, in drunk driving cases, when you exceed certain limits, consequences apply. The higher the limit, the more severe the consequence. So
Right.
if you can even move the blood test a few percentage points, it makes a big difference in the consequences a person faces. That's not quite true with marijuana. With marijuana, you're either convicted or you're not convicted.
But remember I was saying in the scenario where I'm a chronic smoker, aren't I going to have a higher blood test than somebody who just did it one time?
Absolutely. And certainly that's part of the defense that our attorneys would present, that the test itself, while it may be accurate and show 10 nanograms, it doesn't reflect your true impairment. You're perfectly capable of driving the car in a safe manner, even at that limit.
Okay. So it's legal under state law, but I do know that it's still illegal under federal law. What are the consequences of that?
Well, it's always been illegal under federal law, and we'd like to think that the state truly can't make it legal. For the individual user, the federal government has said we have no interest in prosecuting someone to use it for themselves.
I hope they have better things to do.
We hope they do.
So where can I smoke marijuana in Colorado and where is it not allowed?
Well, actually, it's not allowed in public.
Okay.
People are often surprised by this, but you may
Yeah.
not smoke marijuana in a public place.
Okay.
You may not smoke marijuana on any federal land or federal institution.
So what's like an example of federal land? Like I know the courthouse, but what's another example of like federal land?
The airport's one that often confuses people.
Okay.
Because you go through the Transportation Safety Administration checkpoints, you're actually in federal property.
And it also, you can't take it outside the state anyway because then you'd probably be violating neighboring state laws.
That's true, and the neighboring states can't wait to find you.
Oh.
Also, another example of federal land would be many of our ski resorts are located on Forest Service property. It's actually technically illegal to be smoking it on the ski slopes, even though it happens quite often.
So no smoking on federal land, no smoking on the ski resorts. But I mean, is the feds going to really come in and arrest me?
Probably not, although in Colorado now, many of the law enforcement agencies take skiing under the influence very seriously. So
It does sound kind of dangerous.
if you're drunk and you're skiing, or you're stoned and you're skiing, and you run into somebody and hurt them, you could actually be arrested and charged for that as well.
Wow, skiing under the influence. I
True.
didn't know that. But yeah, you could hurt someone very seriously in that situation.
Absolutely.
So where, you said you can't smoke in public. So where exactly is public? Like, can I sit on my front lawn and smoke?
That's a little debatable, but probably yes on your front lawn. Certainly out on the streets.
Out on the streets, yes?
No.
Okay.
At a Bronco game, at a Rockies game,
Okay.
In Civic Center Park, all of those things would be considered in public. You also could not smoke in your hotel room because,
Okay.
of course, your hotel room is non-smoking. You couldn't smoke in a restaurant. You couldn't smoke at a bar. You couldn't smoke in any place that we generally would consider public.
What if I had a smoking room at a hotel room, like a cigarette smoking room? Can you smoke weed in one of the cigarette smoking rooms in a hotel?
You might be able to, although most hotels themselves would prohibit it.
Okay. Although I know some cater to it. So I guess
They
maybe to
do.
be on the safe side, if you want to smoke in the hotel room, you should probably go to one of those that's particularly looks for tourists that are going for that.
For the marijuana tourism, absolutely.
Okay. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I'm going to wrap up my conversation with Doug Thomas, founder of DUI Defense Matters, speaking to me about the recreational marijuana laws in Colorado.
Drunk driving and drug driving cases can be fought and can be won. Our attorneys can also find ways to lessen the consequences of drug driving or drunk driving. Less time with an interlock in your car, less time on probation, maintaining your license to drive to work, maintaining your employment, maintaining your family situation. The value that a lawyer can bring to your freedom and your future far outweighs the few dollars in legal fees for a good DUI attorney. The attorneys at DUI Defense Matters are all experienced litigators. They are there to fight to defend you. They have all prosecuted DUI cases in front of juries. They have all defended DUI cases in front of juries. They know their way around a courtroom, and they know how to defend you. For more information, visit us at DUIDefenseMatters.com.
Welcome back. I'm here in Denver, Colorado, speaking to Doug Thomas, founder of DUI Defense Matters. Doug, I'm from Texas, and I kind of planned a trip to Colorado, particularly to partake in the new recreational marijuana laws. And one of the things I'm interested in is edibles. Does the legality of edibles, is it different than smoking?
Well, it is and it isn't.
Okay.
So most of the laws that apply to smoking also apply to edibles.
Okay.
But edibles come with their own unique set of circumstances.
Okay.
So the edibles have a lot more laws and regulations surrounding them.
Okay, like what?
Well, edibles have to be packaged in a certain way. So edibles have to be sold in a child-proof container.
That makes
So-
sense.
Yeah, many of the edibles are sold mimic
They're candy and chocolate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure, that children
Keep it away from the kids.
are
Absolutely.
safe and don't. So they're required to be in a child-proof container.
Okay.
In addition, edibles now are absorbed differently in your body.
That's
So-
why I want to try it.
Yeah, everybody wants to try it.
Yeah.
But smoking marijuana, the smoking of it goes to your bloodstream very rapidly.
Okay.
Edibles have to be processed by your stomach and then by your liver.
It takes
and
a
so
longer
it takes
time.
a long time.
Okay.
So what happens is people will eat an edible, have no effect.
Mm-hmm.
Eat another edible, have no effect. And then eat 3 or 4 and be in big trouble.
Okay, so what would happen if you kind of eat too much of these edibles?
Well, you can actually get sick and overdose, just like
Okay.
any drug.
Okay.
And theoretically, if you had enough of it, you could actually die from it. It is a poison to your
Really?
body.
Because I thought that was a
Absolutely.
myth.
That is not a myth.
I mean, I can
According-
imagine you wouldn't feel good, but
No, according
Okay.
to the toxicologists that we've spoken to,
Okay.
it's like anything else. If you have too much of a good thing, it could actually harm you.
okay, so I'm only going to take the recommended dosage of an edible. Then, is there anything else that I should be aware of?
Well, so the edibles are packaged in an individual package up to 10 nanograms, and it has to be marked. And for a complete package, it can contain no more than 100 nanograms.
Okay.
So that gives the person the idea of exactly how much they're eating at any given time.
And so it's probably a good idea when you go into one of these stores to really speak with someone who understands what the dosage is. Although, would it be different if, you're a chronic user of marijuana than, once in a while kind of thing?
I don't have any personal experience with that and couldn't give you a lot of advice on that one.
Okay. Well, so I would imagine because edibles take a longer time to kick in, it's particularly a bad idea to drive if you've eaten something like that.
That's right, because you're not sure of the effect of it for a longer period of time, and therefore if that effect happened to hit you while you were driving, you could be in big trouble.
Do you see more DUIs or accused DUIs from edibles than smoking, would you say?
No, it doesn't appear to be. Most of
Okay.
the DUIs we're seeing are for actually smoking it, because again, the outward signs of it are more obvious to the police officers. It's easy for them to spot the pipe or the bong or the marijuana. It's hard for them to determine whether that's a real gummy bear or a fake one.
Well, they probably could test it.
But not just from obvious,
looking at
from,
it.
from looking in your car. And so it makes the police officer's job much harder with edibles than with the outward signs of paraphernalia.
What makes the attorneys at DUI Defense Matters really stand out from the rest?
Well, first, all of our attorneys are former prosecutors and district attorneys themselves.
Oh, nice. So that means they really understand what the prosecutor's going to do, against me?
They understand all the prosecutor's tricks. They have the prosecutor's playbook. In
Okay.
fact, most of them have used that prosecutor's playbook or even helped write part of it. So they understand how it works. They understand the system the best and
Okay.
can defend you within that system better than other attorneys.
Okay, well now I'm worried about cost. I don't have a lot of money. Is it worth it to hire an attorney, or could I maybe get away with representing myself?
Well, that depends how much you like jail time or losing your license or keeping an interlock on your car or other things that could happen to you.
Okay.
We like to think that the value we provide, saving you jail time, maybe being innocent entirely, saving you other consequences, far outweighs the small cost that you'll pay to our attorneys to defend you.
Okay, so I should really just put up the money, have a good attorney, do it right from the beginning, then try to do it myself and risk a really bad outcome.
That's right. Remember, the prosecutors are not there to help you. They're there to prosecute your case.
And they're probably going to do anything they can to get that done.
The prosecutors also want the best outcome for the state, and the best outcome generally involves much harsher penalties than if you had an attorney representing you.
So Doug, what do you think about all this marijuana recreation now in Colorado? Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing for the state?
Well, I guess that depends on your perspective. I think the state wasn't ready for a lot of the things that came out of the marijuana. I think the state wasn't ready for the underage usage that's coming. I think the state wasn't really ready for the edibles. The state's done a better job at trying to get on top of that. Ultimately, from my opinion, encouraging drug use is probably not good for our youth, and maybe long-term not good for the state.
Okay, but I think, we can agree that adults are able to do what they want as long as they keep it safe and they don't drive.
Well, then that's really what the laws are aimed at, is trying to keep it all safe. I think we have a long history of understanding what we can and can't do with alcohol and how to drink alcohol safely. Even many of our large companies talk about drinking responsibly and don't drink and drive. We don't have that history and that message coming with marijuana yet. We think that will come in time, and we hope that everybody understands, just like everything else, they have to use the marijuana safely and responsibly.
Thank you, Doug. I really appreciate you talking to me about this today. For more information about alcohol DUIs, marijuana DUIs, and the legality of smoking marijuana in Colorado, go to DUIDefenseMatters.com.